Okay, fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for joining for today's shiur in Sichos Haran as we continue our journey through this incredible sefer, this amazing collection of teachings, anecdotes, wisdom. And with Hashem's help, let us jump in. I'm going to share my screen as usual, and we can see the sources inside together. Just one moment. Okay. 1 second. There you go. Okay, amazing. So let's jump in. Today's going to be extra special because in addition to the teaching, I've done a little bit of detective work this morning that I'm really excited to share with you. Really, really excited about. So we're going to get to that, Be'ezras Hashem. We are currently in a section of Sichos Haran that is more biographical in nature. There are various biographical anecdotes that are sort of scattered throughout the Sefer, but right now we're in a section that's really basically all focused on Rebbe Nachman's own life, particularly his great efforts and striving in the area of Avodas Hashem. It's something we've spoken about previously that Rebbe Nachman made very clear to his students, of whom hopefully we count ourselves, or learning his Torah, that whatever madrigas that he reached, it wasn't just a gift from Hashem. It wasn't as a result of the pedigree of being born into the family of the Baal Shem Tov. He was the grandchild, great-grandson of the Baal Shem. It was rather as a result of effort. It was a result of work. And Rebbe Nachman wanted to tell us that from the standpoint of encouragement, to let us know, as we're going to see, that everyone could reach the levels that he reached. Really, everybody can put in effort and can strive and can rise, each person in their own way, to extraordinary madrigas, extraordinary spiritual levels. And so we continue learning these teachings with Kuf Nun Tes 159. And he says like this: Pam achas, one time, achar Shavuos Bekila Zaslav, after the holiday, after the Chag of Shavuos, in the community of Zaslav, Amar Lafane B'derech Kuvlina. Rabbi Nachman says, Rabbi Nachman turned to him and he said, like in with like a krechs, like almost like kvetching, but Kuvlina, just saying, Eich Zeichen Lias Yehudi. How does one merit to become a Jew? Eich Zeichen Lias Yehudi. This is Rabbi Nachman, on his level. But he told Rabbi Nachman, how can a person become a Yehudi? This is reminiscent of a teaching. I'm not sure if we learned it together, maybe in some context. I don't know if it was this year or some other series. We learned it actually on Shabbos for the local chevra in our series on Savaziras, but I don't remember if I mentioned it in any of the online series. But there's a beautiful teaching from the Piasetzner Rebbe in his diary, Savaziras, his personal writings, where he reflects on approaching his 40th birthday. And he's thinking to himself, like, what can I bring on? Like, what can be my resolution? I'm coming into a new year, so a new birthday. What do I want to work on this year? And he goes through all the various obvious things, like work on davening, work on learning, and he comes to the conclusion at 39 years old, right, that he can't possibly improve in any of these areas because he's already doing everything he possibly can, right? He's learning as much as he possibly can. He's davening with as much kavanah as he possibly can. And so he says, so what's missing? He says, what's missing is simply, and again, this is like a hard thing to understand, simply to be a Jew. Simply Lios Yehudi. And he turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that writing and he says, Hashem, Gaireni, says, convert me. Convert me. And he was a Rebbe of thousands of Hasidim. He said, I just want to be a Yid. Because a person could daven and learn and do all the mitzvahs, but there's like an akudas hayadus. There's just what it means, Lios Yehudi. Like, to become a Jew. What is that? So Rav Nosson says, Vayisim shtoimim oy lefanav al zeh. And I was totally flabbergasted. I was totally bewildered by this. I'm just going to make a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyeh b'dvarei. So Vayisim shtoimim oy lefanav al zeh. I was astonished. Kivi mashayisi adeh megdulasav avedasa mikvar, because I know what his madrega was, what level he reached, that no human brain could even understand this. And he genuinely felt like nothing started yet. He really felt like he was just at the outset. He wasn't even a Yehudi yet. He was just beginning. Anava Amar, and then Rebbe Nachman clarified, and he told Reb Nassan, Hashem, when I was starting out in my toil of serving God, I never could have imagined reaching the madrega that I've currently reached and experiencing spiritually what I've been privileged to experience. I didn't know any of what I now know. I didn't even know that these things were possible. Can you imagine that back then I should have striven, I should have yearned to reach the madrega that I'm currently at, to know what I currently know? It would not have been possible. Because I didn't even know that these things exist. So how could I yearn for them? I didn't know, it just wasn't on my radar. So how would I have been able to yearn for this? So Im Kain, Rebbe Nachman said, therefore, Gam Achshav, I need to consider, even though I've currently reached the madregas that I've reached, I need to be suspicious that mi yodea ma sheyesh od lahasik. Who knows how much more there is to reach and access and attain? Who knows what else I might be able to tap into? So Rebbe Nachman always lived with beginner's mind, where no matter what level he reached, because he was aware that in relation to the level that he was at, this is unfathomable. So that doesn't mean, okay, now you're there. It means that it's just infinite. And there are always higher madregas, always deeper levels, always more inward hasagas to be able to access. And all of life is supposed to be like that, deeper and deeper. A person learns, a person looks back at where they were 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We should feel that we've developed. You know, it's always like very, it can shake a person up when you reflect on the growth of children. You know, we're privileged enough, Baruch Hashem, our Amichai Eliyahu Ami is turning 2. And it's just like the growth from when he was born at 26 weeks, right? 6 months. It was a very early preemie. And you look in 2 years and he's walking, he's talking, he's like 2 years. And then I think about myself 2 years ago. Like, we put a cap on how much growth we think is possible in a given amount of time. But when you adjust it through the lens of how much children develop and grow, maybe that cap is not as limited and definite as we think. Like maybe it's like a person can really change. A person can really change in a year. A person can really change in 5 years, in 10 years. Like we should be unrecognizable to ourselves, adjusted to where we've come from. This is called beginner's mind. A person's always just beginning. And then Achar Kach Amar, so then he said, although it is true that on the one hand Rabbi Nachman was saying, how does a person become a Yehudi? How does a person become a Jew? Like the piece that's around, but Guy Rainey, just convert me. He felt like he didn't start at all, which on one level could be quite discouraging. Imagine if a person always feels that way, that they haven't even begun. Okay, it could be discouraging. But then Rabbi Nachman always carries the two poles of spiritual experience, one of which, of course, is called Baki Beratzo, which means that a person has to be an expert in running, which in the context over there in Torah Vav, in the 6th lesson of Likutei Moharan, means that no matter what level spiritual connection a person manages to achieve, they constantly need to be an expert in saying, I'm sure there's so much more to accomplish. You can grow. You can move past that. And that's the pasuk in Tehillim that's quoted over there. Im esak shamayim, even David HaMelech said, even when I reach the heaven, shama'ata. There's always more to grow. Sham. You have to always continue and realize that although a person has achieved what they've achieved, there's certainly higher madregas, there's certainly deeper perspectives. We're never, ever, ever there. We've never arrived. Ein adam meis v'chatzi tavasa biyadai. Person doesn't leave this world with even half of their plans, of their dreams, of their taiva fulfilled, not in Gashmias, which is the simple understanding of that Mishnah, but not either in Ruchnias, not either in spirituality. So there's always more. But at the same time, Rebbe Nachman teaches that a person has to also hold on to the other pole, which is called Baki B'Shoiv, which is called being an expert in sitting, not in running. Being an expert in being okay with where you currently are. And that's the nechama of Rabbi Nachman, right? I said in Uman, Nachman is a name, but it is also a description. It's almost like a job title. Like you call like a person who works with milk, right? A chalban, right? A milk maker, right? A person who is involved in hishtadlus is called a shtadlan, right? Meaning, like when you put a nun at the end of a word, it's descriptive of an occupation, like what the person does. So Rabbi Nachman's name is Nachman, but it also describes what he does. He is a Nachman. He is a consoler. And Rabbi Nachman consoles us and consoled himself. He uses his own name in this context. Ach zois nechemasi. He says, this is my nechama. Shekal hayom kulei ani mevala rak al Torah tefillah. That I am doing my hishtadlus. I don't know how one merits to become a Yehudi in the utmost quintessential sense of the pinnacle of what a human being can reach. And that's what he told Rebbe Nachman. How does one merit to become a Jew? Don't know. But my nechama baki b'shoiv is that I'm okay where I'm at. I'm doing what I need to do. And I trust that bit by bit, Hashem will grant me access to all of those madrigas that I don't even know about. I don't even know they exist. I can't even dream about them because I'm not even on the level to dream about that. I don't even know I don't know what they are. But when each and every one of us do what we're supposed to do, and that's going to be adjusted to each person's circumstances, every person's challenges, every person's limitations, it's not the same for everyone at all. When a person does what they're supposed to do, then Hashem will see to it that they'll get there. They'll get there. And that's called Baki B'Shoiv and Baki B'Ratzai. So Baki B'Ratzai is real. Baki B'Ratzai means there's always more to grow. And a person needs to constantly realize, I'm only just beginning. But at the same time, they give themselves the consolation, the comfort, the nechama of the great Nachman, of the great comforter who taught us this teaching of Baki B'Shoiv. Just know that you're doing what you need to do. And that's a great, great nechama. So that's teaching Kuf Nun Tes. Here we look at Kuf Samach. And this addresses Rabbi Nachman's hanhaga of fasting when he was young. When he became older, it would appear that Rabbi Nachman felt, I don't know if he felt like this was a mistake, like he shouldn't have done this, or he wouldn't have done this, or now he no longer needed to do this, because this wasn't really the path of the Baal Shem Tov, right? This was the path of those who came before the Baal Shem Tov, who were very busy with self-mortification and self just inflicting themselves and their bodies, and this was not the path of the Baal Shem Tov at all. The Baal Shem Tov taught, on the contrary, you need to elevate the pleasure of the body in the proper way, in a halachic, obviously, and a way of tahara and a way of mitzvah. But nonetheless, in Rabbi Nachman's youth, this was a practice that he undertook to fast and fast and fast. So shamati mipia ish shashimesh oisai bimei al dusai. Says Rebbe Nachman, I heard from the person who was the attendant of Rabbi Nachman when he was a child. When he was busy fasting. Remember, Rebbe Nachman started his Chasidus on the day of his bar mitzvah, which was also the day of his wedding. Right? So he was a child, essentially. But he was a Rebbe. He was 14 years old, 15 years old, and he had a shamish. He had somebody who took care of all of his needs. And that was when he was fasting. Like we mentioned in a previous Sicha. V'si b'lefanei ishanal, and this person told Rebbe Nachman, Rebbe Nachman rather, shepam achas, one time his'ana Rabbeinu Zal mishabes l'shabes. Rebbe Nachman fasted the entire week. Ube'emtza shavua, in the middle of the week, b'yom revi on the Wednesday, yatsu mimenu dam mechoitmoi u'mishtei einav u'mishtei aznav u'mipiv. Blood started coming out of every orifice in his face. Out of his ears, out of his eyes, out of his nose, out of his mouth. Blood started. And so the person who was supposed to look after Rabbi Nachman started screaming. And he warned Rabbi Nachman, because he was trying to keep it a secret, he was going to make a big rat. He was going to tell everybody what was going on. And he knew that Rebbe Nachman wouldn't like that, meaning he was trying to get him to eat. Rabbi Nachman just sort of calmed him down with his great wisdom. And he said, no, it's okay. It's normal. Normal, right? Normal. What normal? Normal for a person for whom fasting from Shabbos to Shabbos is normal, which is of course not normal. But he said, this is a normal thing. That in the middle, it gets really, really bad. But tomorrow you'll see it'll be easier. And this is almost like sort of emblematic of Rabbi Nachman's whole path, right? Meaning there are times where things get really dark and challenging. And Rebbe Nachman, he says, Kacha derech, this is the way. But you'll see tomorrow will be easier. This is, of course, reminding us of the famous parable that Rebbe Nachman brings about these two beggars, the Jewish beggar, the non-Jewish beggar, right, who are so excited because they're invited for the Seder night. And the Jewish beggar has been telling the non-Jewish beggar, it's the greatest feast of the whole year. And you should, they starve themselves, and the non-Jew is so excited for this great feast. And Rebbe Nachman tells the whole comedic, funny, humorous story about how he's sitting, he doesn't know what a Seder is, comes to the table, everything's set beautifully. And, first everybody gets some grape juice, and then a little vegetable, karpas, yachatz, and then magid. They just start talking for hours. And he's getting so frustrated, he's so mad, because he thought it was going to be a great feast. And then after that, so they wash again, they give out some piece of cracker, right, the matzah, and then finally he's waiting for the feast, when's, and they bring in from the kitchen, this white coarse material. It's not familiar to him, but he's sure this is some great Jewish delicacy, so they give out the maror, and he heaps piles and piles of maror onto his matzah because he's so excited to have this special fancy Jewish caviar or whatever. He takes a huge bite of it, and his whole face just flames up with the spice and the bitterness of the maror, and he can't handle it anymore, and he kicks the table and he runs out. And later that night, the Jewish beggar comes and he sees this, poor starving friend of his lying on the floor, and he tells him, wakes him up. He says, why'd you run away? And he starts cursing him. You lied to me. I haven't eaten in 5 days. I was starving myself, and this is a feast. This is. And his friend tells him, he says, you're such a fool. If you would have waited 2 more minutes, you would have had the feast. Because right after Marar is Shulchan Aruch. Marar Koirech, Shulchan Aruch. And Rebbe Nachman used this as a mashal for all of life. We go through bitterness. There is Marar in life. There are difficult times, difficult circumstances. There are difficult emotional states. There's painful events that occur. There is Marar in life. But the Rebbe, and again, we're just using this sentence, the Rebbe is coming to tell the great. I'm so sorry about that, just lost you for a minute. Let's just jump right back in. So the great Nachman, right, the great consoler, comes to teach us kacha derech. This is life. But if you wait it out, the wisdom of gam ze yavor, right, the wisdom this too shall pass. Tomorrow will be a better day. And that's great wisdom. Not to get too stuck in the moment. We get tunnel vision, that we think like this is the way it's always going to be. And life ebbs and flows, especially when we help it along by making changes in our own selves. And we don't let our circumstances limit us fundamentally. We're open to the possibility that things could be different. Things could change. So you just wait and see. After Mara comes Shulchan Aruch. So this is what he told this person, until the person remains silent. Because Rabbi Nachman had made him promise never to reveal what he was doing. Probably mostly because he didn't want his mother to find out. Because his mother, Fago, was very, very upset with all of his ascetic avodas that he was doing, and she got very, very upset at him, like a good Jewish mother is looking after her son, making sure he eats. But he didn't want anybody to know. Pamachas, another time, Shabbos l'Shabbos, he fasted from Shabbos to Shabbos. Ube'emtza shavua, in the middle of the week, huchrach lishkau al mitasai, he needed to lay down in his bed, v'raglei tala l'mala, usmacha ala moit v'chayetza. And he needed to put his feet up on like a footstool, me'oitzim chalishusa, because he was so weak. But this was his avodah. This is what his avodah was. And we might wonder, how did Rebbe Nachman experience that avodah? What was his lived experience of it? What does it feel like to fast so that blood comes out of the openings in one's face? So listen to this remarkable source. This is in Sichos Haran. It's a collection of oral traditions that were passed down throughout the generations of Breslover Hasidim and transmitted very faithfully by the great mashpia of the previous generation, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Bender Zatzal. And so in Sichos Haran, he gave over the following story, something very similar. One time, be'erev echad, one evening, kishenichnas Reb Chaikel Zatzal, when Reb Chaikel, who was Chazanei shel Rabbeinu HaKadosh Zatzal, he was called the Chazan, Rabbi Nachman's Chazan. He was the Chazan that Rabbi Nachman always wanted to daven for the Amid. His name was Chaikel. So he came in l'Rabbeinu to Rabbi Nachman's room, Shashim Shayaz, because he was his Shamish then, in that period. And Re'eu Shaychiv b'chushat suma kazu, achi yatadame eina va'aznai. He saw Rabbi Nachman in such physical weakness that, again, just like we learned in Sichos Haran, there was blood coming out of his eyes and his ears. This was halfway through the second week. After the previous week, Rebbe Nachman had already fasted for a number of days. So when he was so shocked to see Rabbi Nachman in such a state, he started begging Rabbi Nachman, please eat something. For goodness sake, eat something. And begging him in all different kinds of ways to get Rebbe Nachman to put some food in his system. When he saw that Rebbe Nachman is not listening to him at all, so he started to threaten Rabbi Nachman, and he said, if the Rebbe is not going to listen to me and eat something, I will tell everybody what you're doing. And he said in Yiddish, I'm gonna tell everyone. So Belez Brera Hiskim LaRabbeinu. So having no choice, Rabbi Nachman Hiskim LaRabbeinu, Rabbi Nachman said, okay, I'll eat something. So take a Reb Chaikel and Tarnagoyles El HaShoichet. Reb Chaikel grabbed one of the chickens from his coop and he ran to the Shoichet, to the slaughterhouse. This is the way that when they needed food, this is what they had to do. They ran to a Shoichet. We run to the grocery. They took the live chicken and ran to the butcher. Ubederech Chazra Meret La Es Nitzaiseha Ubishla. So he came back. He returned, he took out all the feathers, ubashla, and he cooked the meat, and he made chicken soup. Everybody knows you need a good chicken soup when you're in the middle of your second week of fasting, right? What else should a Jew eat? Chicken soup, right? Obviously. So he makes him a good chicken soup. But August Pagas, he came into the room, and Pagash Rabbeinu and he sees Rebbe Nachman ech sha'oimedem regel achas al haritzpah veregel shnia al hasafsal. Rebbe Nachman is standing in the room, one foot on the floor, one foot on a bench, probably his hand in his head in his hand, probably, as people, right, that's the pose, holding his head up. He walks into the room, and Nena ilav Rabbeinu va'amar lai. Rebbe Nachman said to him, Sing dem frumen niggin. Sing the spiritual song. Frum really means like yira. Sing the song of Yira Shemayim. Zamar liyas haniggin ha'ma'ayr. Sing the inspirational song. What song is that? Hu haniggin hamafursa min anshish lemeinu ala tevas me'ein olam haba hamashar b'leil Shabbos. This is the niggin that the Breslover Hasidim have a minhag to sing to the words Me'ein Olam Haba, Yom Shabbos Menucha, on Friday night. And to those who are not familiar, I will sing the song to you now, and it goes the following. I'll just sing it with the niggin. It says, Da 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 ma 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 ma. Da 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 ma ya ya ya. Da da ma ya. Da da da. And then it continues. Da 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 ma ya. Ah ya da da da. Ah ya 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 ma ya. Ah da 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 ma ya 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 ya, etc. Right, that's how the niggin goes. So Reb Chaikel Shayalek Yadua Kol Arev. Reb Chaikel had such a beautiful, sweet voice. Neman Betziva Rabbeinu. He was just astonished. He's standing there with a bowl of chicken soup. Rebbe Nachman he doesn't even say anything to him. He just says, sing this song. So v'hiskel zamer as haniggin. So that's what he did. And he sang the niggin. Kishasaimai, when he finished, Ramaz la Rabbeinu biyada sheyachshal niggin shuv. Rebbe Nachman just went like this. He said, do it again. V'chein asa. And he sang the niggin again. Ukishasaimai Ramaz la Rabbeinu shuv l'zamer. There Rebbe Nachman just said, keep on going. V'chein chayzer chalila. And he did the same thing again and again. V'kach amar Rav Chaikel v'zimras haniggin kol halayla. Rav Chaikel stood there with the bowl of chicken soup. Maybe he put it down at some point, but it certainly became cold, and it wasn't relevant anymore. It was not relevant anymore. He stood there and sang Rabbi Nachman this melody the entire night long. Rabbeinu Oymed Etzlei, with Rabbi Nachman standing there. V'adayin lo ta'am me'achila klal, and he didn't taste the food at all. Kisha ala mudah shachar, and then finally it was morning. Dachar Rabbeinu es hamarak. Rabbi Nachman pushed away the bowl of chicken soup. V'himshich b'tzumai ad l'Shabbos hakrevo ba, and he continued fasting until the next week, until Shabbos. This was Rabbi Nachman's avodah. Again, it's hard for us to imagine such a person. We've not heard of such a tzaddik. And evidently, whatever the chicken soup would have done for him, the niggin of Me'ein Olam Haba did a lot more for him than the chicken soup could have ever done. He sustained himself with that melody the whole night. And that's what gave him strength. An unbelievable story. Okay, here we take a look at the next source, again on the same topic. Pam achas, one time, ma'oid below Shabbos. Rebbe Nachman, it was very, very dangerous. And he was in grave danger on an Erev Shabbos, achar atainis mi Shabbos Shabbos, after having fasted the entire week. Because he didn't prepare any food for himself. People are fasting, especially for extended periods of time. They prepare for themselves certain very gentle foods that the system can handle. Right? And he didn't prepare anything for himself because, again, he tried to keep it secret. He didn't want anyone to know. So nobody knew that he had been fasting. So he sat by the Shabbos table and he ate a regular Shabbos meal like everybody else. And this made him very ill. It was really dangerous, and there was an upheaval. There was a rash. And it didn't matter. After that, Hayaholich lemerchatz. He went to the bath house, to the mikvah. V'sham haya mikvah kar ma'oid ma'oid. And the mikvah was extremely, extremely cold. V'halach litbal, and he went to the mikvah. V'amad b'seich hamikvah zman rav ma'oid ma'oid be'erech shtei shoyz rutzufim. He stood in the freezing cold mikvah for not 2 minutes, for 2 hours. Ashra afilu adam bari lo hayachal izbal zayis. Even a healthy person couldn't have done that. This was Rebbe Nachman's body. You know, like we're learning now in Likutei Moharan in the morning about Begadim and about Malchus and about... This is the tzaddik's body. We learned this morning, right? Kasnas are, garments of light, garments of flesh. The tzaddik's flesh is light. His whole body was, like it says, Karan ar panav, like Moshe Rabbeinu's face was illuminated. The regular, normal frameworks of our physiology, just when they're cleansed to this degree, it's just there are different rules. Right? It's just different. So 2 hours he stood in this freezing cold mikvah, and who knows, what his consciousness merited in that moment. Like his body it was gone. His body just wasn't it was all light. Fasting for 6 days, and then freezing cold mikvah for 2 hours. How's that for a self-care ritual, right? A morning routine, All right, here we come to the detective work. This is mamish amazing. Okay, this is the next teaching. Kuf Samach Beis. Bikihila Zlatipoli. In the city of Zlatipoli, his anapam achas mishabes l'shabes. One time, again, he fasted the entire week, and he needed to travel to the bathhouse, to the mikvah. He wasn't able to walk. And he said that the reason that he's so weak that he can't even walk, that he needed someone to carry him to the bathhouse, is only because it was publicized that he was doing this. Because when something is private, it's much stronger. When everyone knows, so then the Satan there's an aspect of ulterior motive or whatever else there is. There's a bechina of, Rebbe Nachman speaks about this in Likutei Moharan, of Ayur Chiyama b'Yamina, and then there's B'Smoila Oisher b'Chaved. There's like a little bit of Leila Shma that makes things weaker. It's best to keep something absolutely private to the extent that one can. Okay, now we move to a different topic. Rabbeinu Zal, even though Rabbi Nachman had a private room in the village where he lived, where he served Hashem, and he was able to do his Hisbodedus, and he had his Svarim, and he was learning and davening, and Afal Pikein, even so, Hayaholich al pi roiv al panei asada, Pesach is a yar v'chiyotze. Rabbi Nachman would often go into the fields and into the forest, v'yemizboided sham harbe. And he would spend much time doing his Hisbodedus, spending time alone, speaking to Hashem in his own words in the way that he taught us how to do. Upam achas halachti ima bikilas medvedivka. Says Rebbe Nachman, one time I traveled with him to Medvedivka, sheyadar sham b'tchila, where he had lived prior. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, right, where he had gone prior. V'halachti imay ana va'ana, and I walked with him from place to place. Eitz al asadis v'aharim, all the fields and the mountains. V'nata yadei al pnei asadis v'aharim, and he went like this with his hand, pointing to all of the fields and the mountains. V'amar li, and he said to me, I'll call eila hasadis v'aharim sha'ata roya sviv ha'ir. V'al kol ha'makamis ha'smuchim la'ir saviv. All of these fields and hills and mountains that you see, bekulam halachti v'sibavti kama v'kama b'am. I know all of these mountains and fields because I've walked through them all. He went to all of these places. And then he told me, Shesham al Roshar, over there in the top of a hill or the top of a mountain, Yishmakim Gavaya Ma'oid, there's a place that's very like a peak. And Mesham Bereish Gavaya Sham Yesh Besoiche Kamei Bika. At the very top of that mountain, there's like a valley in the mountain. And he would climb up to the top of this hill, mountain, and he would enter into that vestibule within the top of the mountain. And that was a place where he loved doing Hisbodedus. And sometimes he would travel to other places. All of this was in the place of Medvedivka. He was already a great tzaddik when he lived there, when he was a child. And this is certainly true for how much Hisbodedus he did when he lived in the little village. Certainly when he was a very young child, growing up in the home of the Baal Shem Tov, which is inherited by his mother and father, who were the grandchildren of the Baal Shem Tov, Sfega and Simcha. This is what he would do for hours on end. He would just walk in nature, alone. There were many, many times where Shahayim is Boided Kol Hayom Kulai. He spent the entire day from morning to night in Hisbodedus. The whole day. An hour, 3 hours, 6 hours, the whole day from morning to night. So that piqued my interest, right? Like, can we find these places? Like, this is a pretty clear description, right? There's a mountain with a cavity in it. We know what area it was, right? So this got me thinking. And then I looked at the next piece, which is Sichos Haran Kuf Samach Gimel. Listen to this. Sipar li ish echa mizlati poli sheba Yoshe Rabbeinu mizlati poli. A person who lived in Zlatipol, who we're going to learn is Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, who was his mechutin, whose son married Rebbe Nachman's daughter. And then his son was Nifter, and Rebbe Nachman's daughter got remarried to the Baal HaTanya's grandson. So Breslov and Chabad were related through marriage, those two Chasidusin. This person, who was present when Rebbe Nachman lived in the city of Zlatipoli, in then Russia. It was early in the morning, in the summer, and Rebbe Nachman davened very early. And Rebbe Nachman sent his young daughter Sarah to call. I think it was his daughter Sarah. Let me just double check this. I have the sefer in front of me. That would be actually pretty interesting. 1 second. No, it was her sister. It was Chaya. Okay, it was this Rabbi Yaakov Yosef's son who married Rebbe Nachman's daughter Chaya. So this was the sister, right, of his to-be daughter-in-law one day. But Rebbe Nachman sent his daughter Sarah to go and call him. Ubal Rabbeinu Zal, and he came. And he came into Rebbe Nachman's room. Va'amar la Rabbeinu Zal, Rebbe Nachman says, Lech imi l'tayel. Come spend the day on a trip with me. V'halach imay chutz le'ir, and they traveled outside the city. V'halach bein asavim, and they went among the grasses. Ana Rabbeinu Zal va'amar. Rebbe Nachman spoke up and he said, Im hayisa zoiche, if you would merit, l'shmaya es kol hashiras v'atishbachos shel ha'asavim, the praises and the singing that the grasses are singing to Hashem. How every blade of grass is singing a song to Hashem, without any ulterior motive, without any distracting thoughts, without any hope for any kind of schar. Oh, how wonderful and beautiful and awesome and sweet. A person who has the merit of hearing the song of the grass, where nature itself sings to Hashem, but not everybody can hear it. Some people merit to hear it. Or beinehem rather. And it's very beautiful, he said, to serve Hashem with awe and radical amazement and wonder when you spend time among nature. Ashkenaz, he said, Es ist sehr gut frum zu sein zwischen sie. It's very special to be able to be frum, to be able to have Yiras Shamayim in nature, when a person is away from humans. Humans are all busy with ulterior motives, and human beings are complicated and all of that. But nature is just pure. It's the way that Hashem created us. Right? It's just the way that Hashem wanted. Everything is transparent to its source. It's not corrupted in any way. It's just beautiful. So how wonderful it is to experience awe of Shamayim in that context when a person's surrounded by nature. Okay, listen to this. Then they walked a little bit more in the outskirts of the town of Zlatipolia. They came to a har shekorim Magila. Okay, we're going to get back to this in a minute. The mountain is, he says, called Magila. Shuhusham samach la'ir, which was near to the city. V'shalei, and Rabbi Yaakov Yosef asked him, Mazos, what is this place? V'heshiv loi, and he answered him, V'sipar loi inyan oisa ha-Magila. Very cryptic. He told him the inyan of this Magila. Strange. What do you mean the inyan? What is that? Then Rabbi Nachman said, let's go there. And they went into it. When they went in, no one can see them surrounding. Because that particular hill or mountain, it was empty inside, and it had a concave, it had a cavity in the hill. And Rabbi Nachman and the person went in there. So I'm thinking to myself, again, I've always thought this, I've learned this many times in the past, and I always wonder, like, this place still exists, right? It's a real place, and Rebbe Nachman didn't live all that long ago. Reason to believe that we could. I wonder if I was thinking in my head, I wonder if we could find it. I wonder if we could identify what is this place. So I had a little bit of time earlier when I was preparing the shiur, and especially today with today's technology, Google Earth, AI that can canvas the whole internet, and and I did the following. I took the first I went to look up the translation of the word Magila, which the English BRI version of Sichos Haran has translated as a small mountain, which is not accurate. Okay, which I found out is not accurate, but that's because they were just saying Shekayr and Magila, so they thought that's Har Echad, right? It's called a Magila. Not true. I took this city's this name Zlatipoli, and I put it into the internet in a Google search to find out what it is called today, like whether it exists as Zlatipola today, like as a modern day Ukrainian city, or if it has another name, and indeed it has another name. Then I went on Google Earth and I put in the name Zlatipoli, which you can see here in front of you if you're looking at the screen. It is now called Novomiorod. Okay, that's the name of, I probably butchered it, but that's apparently the name, right? City in the, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this, something Oblast, central Ukraine, southern part of the middle Dnieper area, etc. And I'm looking at this city, and I zoom in, and at the outskirt of the city, I see this. These sort of hill mountains with circles in them. And I'm thinking to myself, this fits like pretty accurately the description of a hill, because those are hills, even though it's 2D, so you can't really tell, but those are hills with holes in them. What are those hills with holes in them? Because I'm thinking in my mind, maybe they're man-made, like they're pretty, they look pretty, those don't look natural. I've never seen a hill with a circle in it like that. What is that? Like maybe it's something more modern, in which case it wouldn't have been what Rebbe Nachman was talking about. So I put it into AI, to ChatGPT, and I asked it to, I have it set so that it's searching the internet. And I wrote, in the center of Namirov, whatever this city is called, there appear to be some mountains with craters in the middle. What are those? Listen to this. Those mountains with craters are almost certainly, listen to this, ancient burial mounds, also called kurgans, or in Ukrainian, this word. The steppe, which is the mountains around this area, Novy Mirod, which is Zlatipolia, Zlatipoli, that's what it was called, has many Bronze Age and later mounds, and when they were looted or excavated in past centuries, a pit was often dug straight down through the top, leaving the round hill with a crater you see today. So I say, okay, what are those hills called in Ukrainian? I don't know what that Ukrainian word is. How do you pronounce that word? Listen to this. I put it in. It says the Russian word, these letters, is pronounced Mogili, which is the Mogillah that Rebbe Nachman is describing here. That means that there's a very strong likelihood that these two hills on the outskirts of this city, now called Namirov, which was Latipoli, are where Rebbe Nachman used to go to do his Hisbodedus. Not bad. That's pretty wild. That's pretty amazing, just to be able to see that. Like, this is where he went. This is where the following story took place, which we're going to continue the Sicha now. But I mean, I don't know about you, but I would love to go there, right? I would love to take a journey there. Maybe we'll put together a trip, just to be able to sit in the place where the Rebbe did his Hisbodedus, where the Rebbe had his avodas. And if you think of it also, it's like these weren't mountains. That's not what a Mogillah is. These were graves. And that was Inyan Osa Magila. Rebbe Nachman's whole Nekuda was working with the dead. Like, of course Rebbe Nachman went to do his Hisbodedus at a grave. Like, obviously, because Rebbe Nachman's whole thing is Tchias HaMesim. Rebbe Nachman's whole thing is serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu mi beten sha'ol shivati, like the Gemara in Tainus says. Who was it? Reb Zera, one of the tzaddikim, when he used to want to call out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he used to find a concave in the earth, because the pasuk says mi ma'amakim kurasicha Hashem. From the depths we call out to Hashem. Like Rebbe Nachman says in Sichos Haran, either we learned it or we're going to learn it. The ik, I think it's later on in the Sefer, mi beten sha'ol. He says the ikr is to call out to Hashem from the depth of sha'ol. And so, of course, when the Rebbe wants to do his Hisbodedus, he climbs into a grave, into a concave in the middle of a mountain. And this is where Rebbe Nachman was serving Hashem. I just thought that was fascinating. Okay, so let's finish the story here. V'yasher Rabbeinu Zal Sham ala Aretz. Rebbe Nachman sat over there in the mountain that we just looked at. Again, it's probably these mountains here. One of these two hills that have a concave in the center, right outside the city of Zlatipola. V'lakach mi beis yada, he sat down on the ground in that hole, and he took from mi beis yad shaloi, from his bag, Sefer Sharet Tzion, a sefer called Sharet Tzion that's a collection of many, many different prayers of his chaloymar, and he started to daven ubacha moed moed. And he just started crying and crying and crying. And he just was saying page after page, ubacha harbe moed moed bli hefsek, and he cried uncontrollably without stopping. The attendant stood there, and he was holding, I think, like the snuff holder, or the kibul makteres is like the tobacco box. Va'amad mishtaimim, and he stood there astonished. This was his mechutin to be. And he saw Rebbe Nachman's great crying. And he spent a long time there. Because pasak livkos, when Rebbe Nachman stopped crying, that the person should climb out of the hole that they were in and should look to the outside to see what time of day it is. And he came out of there, and he saw he saw that the sun was setting, the day had passed. Rabbi Nachman had cried there with his Sefer Sharet Tzion almost a whole day, B'kayetz, a long summer day, b'li hefsek. After that, Rebbe Nachman said, bring the match or the fire, and he smoked his pipe. And then he stayed there for a bit, and they went out of there. And then Rebbe Nachman told him, there will become a time where it's very hard to get close to him. Probably in reference to how much opposition there would be, to how challenging it would be to try to spread Rabbeinu's inyan in the world, to get people to learn Rebbe Nachman's Likutei Moharan, to get people to do the eitzas, for people to actually draw close to this tzaddik. There would be a time when it would be very difficult. Achani achshav biyedchem. But Rebbe Nachman then said, he said, right now I'm all yours. Va'atem v'Rebbe Yaakov Yosef, and you. Oh, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. This was not Rebbe Yaakov Yosef. I'm sorry about that. I misread. I thought it was. I didn't realize it said the word va'atem. Rebbe Yaakov Yosef was someone else. Okay, I'm sorry about that. This was somebody else. He said va'atem v'Rebbe Yaakov Yosef, but you too, because he was very young at this point. Im tirtzu, if you want, ani yachalasis mikem tzaddikim kamayni ba'atzmi. I can help you become tzaddikim who are literally on whatever level I reach, I can give to you. It's all yours. I can guide you to be able to access what I've been able to access, to climb that ladder with the bekiyas of Baki B'Ratzai, balanced out by the expertise of Baki B'Shayv, that healthy, symbiotic relationship between knowing that there's always more to do, but also being okay and content with what I'm already doing, and as much as I'm trying the best that I can and really doing my avodah to the greatest extent that I can, given our own unique limitations. He said, I can bring you to the highest madrigas. And again, this is like, these sichos are important because even though they don't seem to be Torah, like they're not teachings, they mamish are, because it's so encouraging to be able to recognize who this person was, what kind of madrigas he was on, how easily he could have just secluded himself and closeted himself away and done nothing for anyone other than his own self, and just served Hashem, rising higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And when you think about like a person like this, who obviously, not despite his greatness, but on account of his greatness, was able to be yored, to descend, so to speak, down into our stuff and our challenges and our taivas and our struggles and our lowliness and our sadness and our brokenness and he was able to give us strength. And he was meiser nefesh. Really, he didn't need it for himself. Rebbe Nachman once said, I didn't come down to this world for myself. I don't need a tikkun. I came down to the world to give the tikkun to others. There's a sense of gratitude. He didn't need to do this. He wasn't getting paid to do it. Like he could have done something else. He did this because he cared. He did this because he loved. He did this because his whole mitzias, his whole existence was only focused on what he could give to others, what he could gift to the world, and how he could bring the world closer and closer to the Gula Shlema, to Tikkun HaMalchus, to bring the world closer to the Pasuk, which describes a time when Vayomahu Yi Hashem Echad U'Shmai Echad, when everyone could be living with that level of consciousness, with that level of awareness, with that level of clarity, lucidity, that comfort, that contentment. This was our Rebbe. This was the tzaddik that we're learning from. Unbelievable. So what a privilege, and it was so awesome and fun to be able to share my findings, which blew my mind today. Just you can see with your own eyes, like something that you read about maybe in the past, or are reading about today, and like you see, like this is where that story happened. Again, can't say for sure, but in all likelihood, given the evidence, is a very special thing. So thank you all for joining. As always, it's a privilege to take this journey with you. Real sichos to share these teachings with you, to explore them together. And Hashem should help us, that we should take chizuk from this. That was the Rebbe's whole intention. The Rebbe's whole intention was to give us chizuk. We could be great. He wasn't great because he was born great. He was great because without any anxiety and without any stress and without any pressure, he did great things. He believed in himself and he pushed himself and he worked, not because anybody was forcing him to, not with intensity, just with the realization of like, I can do it. I can really do it. I can be great. So Hashem should help us to continue this journey in our quest to discover the lost princess. I see Rav Paul has a book that's familiar over there in the background, right? The story of our lives, the quest for the lost princess. Hashem should bless us to continue to take this journey with strength and with comfort, with hope, with clarity, with great joy, and we should only hear Besuras Taivis Be'ezras Hashem. Amazing. Just looking at the messages here. Yes, Be'ezras Hashem, I will post a link to the Nigun. Yeah, I'll try to find one and send it. It's an unbelievable classic. And if it can give Rebbe Nachman strength for a whole night after not eating for a week, I think it could give us at least a me'ain, a little taste of the chizuk that he felt from this Nigun, in our own small way. Okay, chazak v'yamatz yidin. Have a great, wonderful rest of your week. All the best. שכל כך אוהב אותי, האב שלי, מלך חי וקיים, על כל נשימה שאני